Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Athena Sorensen, and today our guest is Acting Major Alan Nagata. He is commander of the Communications Division of the HPD.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for being here. Okay, now let's talk about 911. Everybody knows what that is, hopefully. Can you provide an overview and explain the 911 call process for the HPD?
Well, Athena, we'd like to thank you on behalf of Chief Louis Kealoha and the Honolulu Police Department for, allowing us to be here today and for explaining to your viewers a little bit about 911, because that's so important.
It is.
The 911 call process basically starts if someone has some type of emergency or maybe even a non-emergency, and you dial that number. We all know that. But in Honolulu, the call process is when you call 911, it comes to our communications division at the Honolulu Police Department, and what happens is a call screener will ask, is your call for police, fire, or ambulance? And if you should say, for example, you need fire, ambulance, such as that, we will route you to the appropriate agency. But if your call for service is for police, we will ask you if it's an emergency or not, and we will route your call that way. And one thing I wanted to make clear, with your viewers, is that, when it's an emergency, we're talking about like a crime in progress, for example, Athena, and maybe even something like where someone's hurt. And a non-emergency may be taken as something like a cold case. If someone finds like a purse or wallet and they want to turn it into a police officer, there's less urgency than when someone's hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of the call process for us, yeah. So the calls come into the Honolulu Police Department 911 call center, and from there we'll transfer the calls out depending on the need or request.
Okay. Now, is it only for life and death emergencies?
No. Well, you know what? Let me clarify that. Yes, it is, because 911 is for everything here in Honolulu.
Okay.
And so what it is, whether it's for a non-emergency or emergency, you call 911, and then as I stated earlier, if it's for police, we're going to ask you if it's an emergency at that point or a non-emergency, and we'll route your call to the appropriate call taker. Because if your call is for an emergency, like someone's hurt, we're going to expedite that call, right? We don't want you to wait.
Okay.
We don't want anybody to wait, actually, but if someone's hurt or it's an argument, we want to expedite our resources to their calls for help. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you say to someone who's not quite sure if they're in a situation that's considered an emergency and they're doubting? What do you say to that person?
If that's the case, we have to err on the side of caution and send it as an emergency.
Okay, just tell them to call.
Yes, just call 911. Don't hesitate.
Okay, now do people ever call in with false alarms?
A lot of times we do have those situations when people call in false alarms. Unbeknownst to them, sometimes that call may not turn out to be what it is, but we still have to treat all calls as seriously. So no matter what, whether you have an emergency or non-emergency, if you need to speak to a police officer or even any other first responder, call us, let us know. That's what we're here for, really, right?
Right, exactly. Now, do people get charged a fine or they get in trouble if it's a false alarm?
No, false alarms, as long as it's genuine. Like, for example, if you have you think there's an emergency, you think you heard somebody fall, or you may have heard an argument and you call for a first responder or a police officer, and it turns out it's not an argument or the person is really not injured. It's like I said earlier, it's better to err on the side of caution.
Okay.
And we do recommend people call, because you know what? We may not know, and it's always to be safer.
Then sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
So what should a person say when they call 911?
Well, when you call 911, as I stated to you earlier, initially the call screener will ask you if it's for police, fire, or ambulance.
Okay.
Right? And that time you will need to let us know what your emergency is. So, for example, if you need a medical help, you're going to need to tell us that it's for ambulance or emergency services, and we will route your call appropriately. We'll also probably ask you if the person is conscious or breathing, right? And that's another factor, because that will increase the level of our urgency regarding the call, okay? And that's the way the first line of our 911 calls come into our system.
Okay. Has it always been, when they answer, they say, do you need fire, ambulance, police? Has it always been that way?
Yes, it's always been that way. And generally what it is, it'll say, hello, police, not police, fire, ambulance, what is your emergency? And the person will basically have to come out with telling us what their emergency is. Okay?
Okay.
And if the person can't talk, for example, like it's an open line call, and you know, we get a lot of those where people can't talk, and we have a connection. We know someone's on the other end, and they're not saying anything. That call will be treated as an open line call. We'll send it to emergency response, meaning our urgent response section, and we'll have an officer go check that out, especially if we can get some info on that call.
Right.
And I'm going to clarify that a little more because it's dependent on what type of phone you possibly use to call also, right? Because we need information to respond to an emergency.
Exactly. Okay. Now, how many total calls did the HPD receive in 2014?
You know, I always get these calls, I always get these questions every year regarding our annual calls. And the best way I can sum it up for everyone is, you know, for our island, especially Honolulu, we get a lot of calls, and it's almost a million. Almost a million calls that comes into our public safety answering point at the Honolulu Police Department Communication Division. Yes, that's a lot. And of those calls, about, say, 869,000 of them are for police service. So, you know, our officers are really working hard out there, keeping our streets safer and making our place a much safer place to live, work, and play. But what I wanted to also share with you, Athena, is that while our officers are working hard, you know, my dispatchers, my staff at the Communications Division are working doubly hard because they provide those services for our officers and the public that we don't know about. So, for example, you know, when there's an accident, have you ever wondered how an ambulance suddenly appears or even a fire truck? Well, what happens is our dispatchers, our police radio call takers, they'll call and make contact with those first responding agencies to request their response to that motor vehicle collision. So it just doesn't happen. Someone has to do that work.
Right.
You know, or even tow wagons. Yeah, when tow wagons appear on scene and they start towing the car, and you wonder, where did they appear from?
Yeah.
But it's our dispatchers that are doing that work. And that's what I wanted to share with you. You know, they work just as hard as our officers, and they're just as important in, you know, at the Honolulu Police Department and making Honolulu a safer place to live, work, and play.
Okay.
It's a combined effort. It's a team effort.
A team. Okay.
Yes.
So without that whole team working together, something's going to be missing.
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, they're a very important part of this team, you know, and we're very proud of the work that they do because they keep our streets safe as well as our officers because they're actually the ones who take the first call. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when someone has an emergency, generally you report it via phone to our Communications Division. So we're kind of like the heart and soul of the division, right? Because the officers are out on the field. You get to see them every day. And a lot of times, you know, you don't know about what our dispatchers do.
Are doing. Okay. So how long should someone stay on the line? If they're calling in, how long should they stay on the line?
Well, you know what? You should stay on the line. You should stay on the line if it's an emergency. We're going to eventually answer your call if for some reason we can. There's a backup in our calls. We're going to get to it. You may hear, right, answering service what says that, you know, the line is busy, please stay on the line, but we're going to get to it. Okay. Stay on the line. Do not hang up. If you have any emergency, please stay on the line.
So is it safe to wait until someone arrives before you hang up the phone?
Well, you know what? Based on what you said to me, if you have an emergency, it depends on the nature of the emergency. Because if you're reporting, for example, something like a prowler or someone may be inside your house, my understanding, and I believe our call takers, may stay on the line with the caller.
Okay.
Okay? But if you're reporting, for example, a motor vehicle collision that you just witnessed or heard, you don't necessarily have to stay on the line for that. Just giving us the location, address, who may be involved, that kind of stuff. You don't need to stay on the line. But very urgent cases that I described to you earlier, such as, you know, home invasion, which unfortunately, you know, if it should occur, you may need to stay on the line, and the call taker will help you with that. You get prompted on that. It doesn't happen very often, though. Let me clarify that, okay?
Okay. Okay. So if someone's calling and let's say their baby's choking and they don't know how to do CPR, does the person who answered the phone on the other line, can they help them with that?
You know, that's a very good question. And a lot of times when we get situations like that, we're going to forward that call, as I stated to you earlier, to the Emergency Services Division, right? Our EMS personnel. And they're trained for that.
Right.
And, you know, just basically what I know, they'll stay on the line and help you. Okay. Just like for us, if it's a police incident, we're going to stay on the line. We're not going to let somebody be alone, especially, like I said, if you're in a house alone and you think someone's inside your house, we're going to stay on the line with you until an officer gets there.
Right.
But it depends on the situation. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So when a landline phone is used to call 911, what type of information is provided?
You know, when a landline phone call makes a call to 911, we get your subscriber name, we get your phone number, and we also get an address. And you know, Athena, it's really important because when landline phones are used to call 911, that valuable information can be used to send our first responders in case you have an emergency. So remember earlier in this interview, I talked about an open line call. For example, if you use a landline and you call 911 and you can't say anything because something's happened to you, such as maybe you're having a heart condition or your epilepsy or something like that, you can't talk. We'll have your address and we'll have a dispatchable location that we can send the first responders to in case of your emergency. So that's what I was telling you earlier regarding open line calls. It's really something we have to clarify because we need that information in order to send the first responders, okay?
Okay. So what happens if someone calls and they get disconnected with you and they can't give you their information?
Well, you know what? If it's a disconnected type of call and if it's from a landline, right? And if we do have that information, such as, like I said earlier, your phone number, your subscriber address, right, and your subscriber information, we can make a call back to find out if everything's okay.
Oh,
and confirm everything. And if for some reason that, you know, we can't get in contact with you or confirm this, an officer or a first responder may be sent. But if you answer the phone and you say, you know, it was a mistake, because sometimes we call 911 by mistake, right? And I think the term the public uses is, my kids use is like butt dial. Yeah, you know, and that's why we confirm it.
Okay. So are there any circumstances where someone should not call 911?
You know what, Athena, I would say, using my children as an example, don't call 911 if it's a prank. Because, you know, when my son called 911, it was embarrassing many years ago because he wanted to test it. He learned about it in school, and he found out the hard way that it works. And what happens is they called my house to confirm if everything was okay. And because initially he called and he hung up. Right, and you know, he called from a landline phone, so it had my subscriber name, address, phone number, and they called me back and saying, Mr. Nagata, you know, is everything okay? Because we had a call from 911, and I was thinking my son was just here. But those are the situations you don't call because 911 works, and we recommend and we urge people to only call in the event of an emergency. But if you have a non-emergency and you need a first responder, by all means call.
Okay. Okay.